The moment I saw her walk down the aisle toward my son, something felt wrong. There was something vaguely familiar about my new daughter-in-law that I couldn't quite place, something in the way she carried herself, or perhaps in her smile that didn't quite reach her eyes when she looked at me during the reception. It would take 8 months before I discovered the devastating truth. Jennifer, my son's new wife, was actually my estranged brother's ex-wife, systematically executing a calculated plan for revenge against our entire family. She hadn't fallen in love with my son Thomas by chance. She had deliberately targeted him, researched him, and manipulated him into a whirlwind romance, all to infiltrate our family and destroy us from within. By the time I uncovered her true identity, she had already turned my son against his entire family, drained his savings account, sold precious family heirlooms, and was well on her way to completely isolating him from everyone who truly loved him. When I finally confronted her with irrefutable evidence of her deception, she didn't even try to deny it. Instead, she looked me straight in the eye and said with chilling calmness, "Your brother Robert destroyed my life. Now I'm going to destroy his entire family, one by one. And the best part, your own son is helping me do it." Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening in the comments. My name is Harold Stevens, and until this nightmare began, I had lived what most would consider a successful and fulfilling life. Born and raised in Connecticut, I was the first in my family to attend college, working nights as a security guard to pay my tuition at the state university where I studied architecture. Those early years taught me discipline and perseverance, qualities that would serve me well throughout my life and career. After graduation, I worked for several established firms before taking the leap to start Stevens Architectural Design at 32. Those early years of entrepreneurship were challenging, sleepless nights worrying about making payroll, constantly hustling for new clients, and learning the business side of architecture through trial and error. But gradually, through a combination of innovative designs, reliable project management, and word-of-mouth recommendations, the firm established a solid reputation in the Northeast. What began as a one-man operation in a tiny rented office eventually grew into a respected firm with 48 employees, and a portfolio of award-winning commercial and residential projects across the country. I built this respected architectural firm from the ground up, raised 3 children with my wife of 45 years, and was enjoying semi-retirement, still consulting on special projects while having time to travel and enjoy my 5 grandchildren. My wife Laura and I met during my second year in business when her law firm hired me to design their new offices. Laura was a brilliant contracts attorney, precise, thorough, and formidable in negotiations. I was immediately drawn to her sharp mind and quiet confidence. After 6 months of professional interactions, I finally worked up the courage to ask her to dinner. She later admitted she had been waiting impatiently for me to make that move, having decided weeks earlier that I was worth pursuing. We married 18 months later and began building our life together. Laura continued her legal career, eventually becoming a partner in her firm, while helping me navigate the complex contracts and legal considerations of my growing business. Her expertise saved us from numerous potential pitfalls over the years, and her steady income helped sustain us during the inevitable lean periods of entrepreneurship. Our oldest son, Michael, now 42, had followed in my footsteps and now ran the family business. From childhood, he had shown an aptitude for spatial reasoning and technical drawing, spending hours in my home office looking through architectural plans and asking insightful questions. After graduating with honors from Cornell's architecture program and working for several prestigious firms to gain experience, he joined Stevens Architectural Design 15 years ago. Under his leadership, the firm has continued to thrive, expanding into sustainable design and historic preservation projects that have garnered national recognition. Michael married his college sweetheart, Rebecca, a landscape architect whose complementary skills have brought additional dimension to many of our projects. They have 3 children, Emma, 15, Zachary, 13, and Olivia, 10, all bright, engaged kids who show various combinations of their parents' creative and analytical abilities. Our daughter Catherine, 40, chose medicine rather than design as her calling. Always compassionate and scientifically minded, she excelled academically and graduated from Johns Hopkins Medical School before specializing in pediatrics. Catherine possesses a natural gift for connecting with children, making her exceptionally effective in her practice at Boston Children's Hospital. She married Daniel, a pediatric surgeon she met during her residency, and they have 2 children, Sophie, 8, and Ethan, 6. Despite their demanding careers, they've created a warm, loving home where education and compassion are paramount values. And then there was Thomas, our youngest at 34, always a bit more sensitive and creative than his siblings. From an early age, Thomas marched to the beat of his own drum. While Michael was methodically building model bridges and Catherine was memorizing the bones of the human body, Thomas was crafting elaborate fantasy worlds through stories and drawings. His creativity was boundless, but he struggled with the structured environment of traditional education, often finding himself bored or misunderstood by teachers who didn't know how to channel his creative energy productively. Laura and I worked hard to nurture his artistic talents, while helping him develop the discipline needed to translate his ideas into completed works. After high school, Thomas attended the Rhode Island School of Design, where he thrived in the creative atmosphere but sometimes struggled with deadlines and the business aspects of art. After graduation, he bounced between various creative jobs: graphic designer for an advertising agency, illustrator for a small publishing house, freelance artist, never quite finding his niche. It was a difficult period for him, and for us as parents, watching him struggle to find his place while his siblings progressed steadily in their chosen paths. After a few false starts career-wise, he had finally found his passion as a graphic novelist, creating moderately successful comic series that allowed him to make a decent living doing what he loved. His breakthrough came at 29, when his graphic novel, Shadowlands, a haunting exploration of grief and memory, caught the attention of a respected independent publisher. The book received critical acclaim, winning several industry awards and establishing Thomas as a unique voice in the graphic novel community. While not achieving mainstream commercial success, he built a dedicated following that allowed him to support himself through his art, a victory that meant more to him than financial wealth. Thomas had always been unlucky in love. A series of relationships had ended painfully for him, leaving him with a tendency to fall hard and fast for women who weren't right for him. His artistic temperament, passionate, sensitive, sometimes moody, seemed to attract women who were initially captivated by his creativity, but ultimately unprepared for the realities of life with an artist. His longest relationship, with a gallery owner named Sophia, lasted 3 years before ending when she received an opportunity to run a prestigious gallery in London. The breakup devastated him, and he retreated into his work for nearly a year afterward. After his last breakup 2 years ago, he had seemed to mature a bit, focusing on his career and approaching dating with more caution. This latest heartbreak had been particularly difficult. Claire, a fellow artist he had dated for 8 months, had abruptly ended their relationship, revealing she had reconnected with an ex-boyfriend. Thomas had taken the rejection hard but channeled his emotions into a new graphic novel series that was receiving the best reviews of his career. So we were surprised when, just 14 months ago, He called us excitedly to announce he had met someone special online, a woman named Jennifer Davis. "She's amazing, Mom and Dad," he gushed over the phone. "She's beautiful, smart, loves my work, and we just connect on every level. I've never felt this way before." Thomas explained they had met in an online forum for independent comic creators, where Jennifer had posted thoughtful, insightful comments about his latest work. Their conversation had moved to private messages, then phone calls, and finally in-person meetings. According to Thomas, Jennifer had a background in marketing and had offered valuable suggestions for promoting his work. She seemed to understand both the creative and business sides of his career, a combination that had eluded his previous partners. Within just 2 months of meeting, Thomas and Jennifer were engaged. Laura and I were concerned about the speed of the relationship, but tried to be supportive. When Thomas brought Jennifer to our home in Greenwich for dinner, I remember Laura squeezing my hand under the table, a silent signal of shared concern about the whirlwind romance. When we finally met Jennifer at their engagement dinner, she was charming, attentive, and seemed genuinely in love with Thomas. She was indeed beautiful, 40 years old, 6 years older than Thomas, with striking features, impeccable style, and a sophisticated air about her. With her sleek dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and poised demeanor, she projected an image of success and confidence. She told us she was a freelance marketing consultant who had relocated to Chicago recently after living in Seattle for many years. Throughout dinner, Jennifer masterfully directed conversation, asking thoughtful questions about our family and sharing just enough about herself to seem open, while revealing surprisingly little of substance. She spoke of growing up in California, attending the University of Washington, and building a successful marketing career working with various creative professionals. When Michael asked about specific campaigns she had worked on, she deftly redirected the conversation back to Thomas's work and how she planned to help elevate his profile in the industry. Something about her struck me as familiar, but I couldn't place it. I assumed perhaps she resembled someone I had met through work over the years. The wedding was planned quickly, just 3 months after the engagement. Jennifer seemed to take charge of everything, politely but firmly declining Laura's offers of help or input. She also discouraged Thomas from incorporating any of our family's wedding traditions, insisting on creating new traditions for their life together. When Catherine attempted to include Thomas's favorite childhood dessert at the rehearsal dinner, a family tradition, Jennifer overruled her, claiming Thomas had developed an aversion to it. Thomas, seeming confused, eventually sided with Jennifer, despite having requested that very dessert for his birthday just months earlier. The guest list from Thomas's side was extensive: family, childhood friends, college roommates, work colleagues. Jennifer, however, claimed to have a very small circle, inviting only 2 friends who apparently knew her from her time in Seattle. Both women, Diane and Melissa, seemed somewhat uncomfortable at the pre-wedding events, and their interactions with Jennifer had a strange formality that Laura noticed immediately. "Those women don't seem like old friends," she whispered to me during the rehearsal dinner. "They barely know anything about her past." No family attended from her side. She explained that her parents had passed away years ago, and she was an only child with no extended family she was close to. The wedding day itself was beautiful but strange in ways I couldn't articulate at the time. Jennifer was coolly polite to our family, but kept physical distance whenever possible. During the reception, I noticed her watching me and Laura with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between satisfaction and contempt. When I approached her for a dance, as is customary for the father of the groom, she accepted with a tight smile and maintained a formal distance throughout. "You have a wonderful son," she said as we danced. "I intend to make sure he has everything he deserves." Something in her tone made it sound more like a threat than a promise. One moment particularly stands out in my memory now. During the reception, my elderly Aunt Martha approached Jennifer with a family Bible that had traditionally been presented to new members joining our family. Jennifer accepted it with a polite smile, but later I noticed the Bible abandoned on a side table. When Laura retrieved it and tried to return it, explaining its significance, Jennifer curtly informed her that they weren't religious and didn't want old things cluttering their new home. Thomas, who had always appreciated family history and traditions, said nothing, smiling vaguely as though he hadn't heard the exchange. After the honeymoon, an expensive 3-week trip to Europe that Thomas insisted on paying for entirely, despite our offers to help, we began to see less and less of our son. Initially, there were plausible excuses. They were settling into their new home, a downtown condo Jennifer had convinced Thomas to purchase, stretching his finances considerably. Jennifer was helping Thomas with a major deadline for his latest graphic novel. They had social obligations with Jennifer's work contacts. But gradually, the excuses became vaguer, and Thomas became increasingly difficult to reach. His once active social media accounts grew quiet, with posts appearing only occasionally, always carefully crafted images of his seemingly perfect relationship with Jennifer. Gone were his thoughtful reflections on art and creativity, replaced by posed photos and generic captions that didn't sound like him at all. When we did see them, it was always on Jennifer's terms, at restaurants she selected, for precisely timed visits that she would end by pointedly checking her watch. During these encounters, Thomas seemed different, slightly withdrawn, deferential to Jennifer's opinions, and quick to defend her if we asked innocent questions about their life together. "Jennifer needs her privacy," he would say. "She's had some difficult experiences in the past." His creative work began to change as well. Thomas's artistic style had always been distinctive, introspective, emotionally nuanced with complex characters and storylines. But his new projects, which Jennifer was now co-managing, felt commercial and simplified. When Michael mentioned this change during a Rare Brothers lunch, Thomas became defensively angry. "Jennifer understands the market better than anyone," he snapped. "She's helping me reach a broader audience. Not everyone wants to read depressing, artsy stories." Michael was stunned into silence. Thomas had never before prioritized commercial appeal over artistic integrity, and depressing and artsy were criticisms he had previously rejected when applied to thoughtful, complex work. 3 months after the wedding, Thomas called to tell us he was making Jennifer a partner in his small publishing company. Laura and I were alarmed. He had built this business over years of hard work, and Jennifer had no background in publishing or graphic art. When I cautiously suggested he might want to consult with our family attorney before making such a significant business decision, he became defensive. "Jennifer understands my vision better than anyone," he insisted. "She has amazing marketing ideas that will take my work to the next level. I don't need legal advice to include my wife in my business." Shortly after this conversation, Thomas's longtime collaborator and friend, Marcus, contacted me with concerns. Marcus had been Thomas's colorist for years, contributing significantly to the distinctive visual style of his work. "Mr. Stevens," Marcus said hesitantly, "something strange is happening with Thomas. He's changing projects midstream, abandoning stories he was passionate about, and Jennifer is now reviewing all my work directly. She's rejected color schemes Thomas and I had already agreed upon, and when I tried to discuss it with him directly, he told me I needed to adapt to the new direction or find other projects." Marcus wasn't the only one to notice changes. Thomas's editor at his publishing house, Elaine Winters, called Laura, whom she had met at several book launch events, to express her worries. "Laura, I've worked with Thomas for 5 years, and I've never seen him like this. He submitted a completely different manuscript than what we had discussed, something much more commercial and, frankly, less interesting. When I asked about the change, he said Jennifer had helped him see the weaknesses in his original concept. The new work isn't bad, but it's not Thomas. The real troubles began about 5 months into the marriage. Thomas started calling his mother with requests to borrow family heirlooms, specifically valuable jewelry pieces that had been in Laura's family for generations. Jennifer would like to wear Grandma's sapphire necklace to a charity gala, he explained, and maybe the pearl earrings too. Laura was hesitant but didn't want to cause friction. She lent the pieces with the understanding they would be returned promptly. They weren't. When asked about them, Thomas became evasive, then eventually admitted Jennifer had taken them to be professionally cleaned and appraised for insurance purposes. Weeks passed, and despite repeated inquiries, the jewelry was not returned. The situation escalated when Laura's sister, Elizabeth, visited from California and asked about the sapphire necklace, which had particular sentimental value as it had belonged to their grandmother. "I was hoping to show it to Emily," Elizabeth said, referring to her granddaughter who was studying jewelry design. When Laura explained the situation, Elizabeth was concerned. "Laura, that necklace has been in our family for 4 generations. Are you sure it's safe?" The question hung in the air, giving voice to fears Laura had been suppressing. Around the same time, Thomas's behavior became increasingly erratic. He withdrew from collaborations with other artists, claiming Jennifer was helping him refocus his creative energies. He missed his nephew's birthday party, something completely out of character for him. When his brother Michael called to check on him, Thomas accused him of always being jealous of his artistic success, an absurd claim given their completely different career paths and supportive relationship. Catherine reported similar concerning interactions. After Thomas missed her son Ethan's school play, an event he had specifically promised to attend, she called to check on him. "He sounded like he was reading from a script," she told us afterward. He said Jennifer had helped him realize he needed to establish boundaries with family to protect his creative time. Then he accused me of never supporting his art career, which is absurd. I've been his biggest fan since we were kids. Then came the financial requests. Thomas called asking for a substantial loan, claiming cash flow problems due to a delayed contract payment. When I asked for details to see how I could help, he was vague and defensive. I later discovered through our family accountant that Thomas had made several large withdrawals from his savings and investment accounts, money he had been prudently building for years. The accountant, Bernard Goldman, who had managed our family's finances for decades, expressed concern during our quarterly review. "Harold, I don't like to intrude in family matters, but Thomas has liquidated nearly 70% of his portfolio in the past 4 months. When I asked about his investment plans, he said Jennifer is handling their financial strategy now. I suggested they consult with me before making any more major moves, and he essentially told me to mind my own business." At a family dinner we finally managed to arrange at our home, I noticed Thomas looked tired and stressed. His usually vibrant appearance had dulled. He'd lost weight, his clothes hung loosely, and the creative spark that typically animated his conversations was noticeably absent. When Jennifer went to the restroom, I gently asked if everything was okay. His response was practiced and hollow. "Everything's fine, Dad. Jennifer and I are just making some lifestyle changes and investments. I wish you and Mom would stop worrying and just be happy for me." But it was impossible not to worry. Thomas, once vibrant and independent, now seemed like a shadow of himself, constantly checking his phone for texts from Jennifer, seeking her approval before answering even simple questions about his work. One particularly disturbing incident occurred when our oldest grandchild, Emma, showed Thomas a short comic she had created, inspired by his work. In the past, Thomas had always been encouraging of Emma's artistic efforts, offering gentle guidance and enthusiastic support. But this time, after glancing at Jennifer, who gave an almost imperceptible shake of her head, Thomas returned the pages with barely a glance. "Maybe you should focus on something more practical, Em. Not everyone can make a living as an artist." Emma was crushed, and Michael had to restrain himself from confronting his brother about this uncharacteristic cruelty. Laura was beside herself with concern, especially after Catherine reported that Thomas had suddenly canceled plans to illustrate a children's book about medical procedures she was writing to help her young patients, a project he had been enthusiastic about for months. He said Jennifer felt it would dilute his artistic brand, Catherine explained, clearly hurt. These accumulating concerns led Laura and me to have several difficult conversations about whether and how to intervene. We were walking a delicate line, respecting Thomas's autonomy as an adult while increasingly worried that he was being manipulated and isolated. Laura's legal background made her particularly attuned to the concerning pattern. "This is textbook controlling behavior," she said one night as we discussed the situation. "Isolation from family and friends, financial control, personality changes, gaslighting. If Thomas were a client describing these behaviors in a partner, I'd be giving him domestic abuse resources." We considered various approaches, from direct confrontation to family intervention, but feared pushing Thomas further away. Finally, we decided to seek professional guidance and consulted with Dr. Alina Winters, a family therapist who specialized in adult family dynamics and relationship manipulation. Dr. Winters advised caution. Directly challenging the relationship could backfire dramatically, she explained. People in controlling relationships often become defensive of their partners and may cut off anyone who criticizes the relationship. Instead, focus on maintaining connection however you can, even if it's on Jennifer's terms. Keep the door open and watch for opportunities when Thomas might be receptive to support. Following this advice, we tried to maintain whatever connection Jennifer would permit, accepting the limited, controlled interactions while looking for any opportunity to speak with Thomas alone. The turning point came 8 months after the wedding. Laura and I were sorting through old family photos for a digital archiving project when we came across pictures from my younger brother Robert's wedding 15 years earlier. Robert and I had once been close, but a bitter business dispute had led to an irreparable falling out. In the early days of my architectural firm, Robert had joined as a partner, bringing his engineering expertise and substantial financial investment at a critical growth period. For several years, we worked well together, combining my design vision with his technical knowledge and business acumen. But as the company grew, our differences in philosophy became increasingly problematic. Robert pushed for rapid expansion, taking on corporate clients and projects that I felt compromised our design integrity. I preferred sustainable growth and projects we could be proud of artistically. The breaking point came when Robert unilaterally committed the firm to a massive corporate development project that I felt violated every principle our firm stood for. A soulless, environmentally problematic complex that prioritized profit over design integrity and community impact. The ensuing argument was explosive and public, ending with Robert leaving the firm and demanding his investment be returned in full, immediately, a financial burden that nearly bankrupted the company I had built. He had moved to Seattle, established his own successful engineering firm, and we hadn't spoken in over a decade, a painful estrangement that the whole family felt. I had made attempts over the years to heal the rift, especially after significant family events like the birth of grandchildren, but Robert had rebuffed every overture. As Laura flipped through these old photos, she suddenly gasped, "Harold," she said, her voice shaking. "Look at this. Look at the woman in this picture." There, standing beside my brother Robert, was a younger but unmistakable Jennifer, her hair styled differently and perhaps a few cosmetic enhancements since, but definitely her. She was his bride, Jennifer Whitfield, her maiden name before marrying my brother, now calling herself Jennifer Davis and married to our son. The shock was indescribable. Could this possibly be a mistake? A remarkable resemblance. But the more we studied the photos, the more certain we became. Laura immediately called our daughter Catherine, who had briefly met Robert's wife at the wedding before our estrangement. Catherine confirmed our suspicions. "That's definitely the same woman. I remember her clearly because she made such a point of asking me about Thomas's art projects, even though he was just a teenager then." This revelation explained the nagging familiarity I'd felt upon meeting Jennifer. I had indeed met her before briefly at my brother's wedding. But she had clearly changed her appearance enough, and given the 15-year gap and the context of meeting as my son's girlfriend rather than my brother's wife, I hadn't made the connection. Now we needed to understand what had happened. I reached out to a former colleague who still had occasional contact with Robert and learned the disturbing details. Robert and Jennifer had gone through a viciously contentious divorce 5 years ago. Robert had discovered she had been systematically stealing from his company and had evidence she was planning to leave him after transferring significant assets to offshore accounts. The divorce was ugly, with Jennifer ultimately losing her claim to the substantial settlement she believed she deserved. According to my contact, she had been furious, vowing revenge. She had apparently left Seattle shortly after the final court judgment. The colleague, Paul Henderson, provided even more disturbing information. After the divorce, Jennifer tried to turn Robert's friends and business associates against him with elaborate stories of abuse and mistreatment, Paul explained. When that didn't work, she targeted his reputation directly, creating anonymous online accounts to post negative reviews of his company, and even contacting clients with false stories about unethical practices. Robert had to get a restraining order against her about 3 years ago. With this information, Jennifer's plan became horrifyingly clear. Unable to extract what she wanted from my brother directly, she had researched his estranged family, identified Thomas as a vulnerable target, and orchestrated their chance meeting online. Everything, her interest in his work, her quick push for marriage, her isolation tactics, the financial maneuvers, was part of a calculated revenge scheme against my brother by destroying his nephew's life and hurting our entire family in the process. Uncertain how to proceed with such explosive information, Laura and I consulted with our family attorney, who advised documenting everything before confronting either Thomas or Jennifer. He also suggested hiring a private investigator to verify our suspicions and gather additional evidence. The Pie's report, delivered 2 weeks later, confirmed our worst fears and added disturbing new details. Jennifer had indeed legally changed her name from Whitfield to Davis after the divorce. She had researched Thomas extensively before, accidentally, encountering him in an online forum for graphic novelists. The investigator found evidence that she had created multiple fake accounts to engage with Thomas's work online, building a presence in his professional community months before making direct contact. Most alarmingly, the Pie discovered that several of the family heirlooms ostensibly borrowed for special occasions had been sold through high-end consignment shops in neighboring states. The sapphire necklace, worth approximately $45,000, had been sold in Milwaukee. The pearls had been sold in Indianapolis. The investigator also uncovered something we hadn't suspected. Jennifer had a history of similar behavior. Before marrying Robert, she had been briefly engaged to a successful surgeon in Portland. Leaving the relationship abruptly after he updated his will to include her, but before the marriage took place. There was also a pattern of short-term employment at various companies, often ending abruptly amid accusations of financial impropriety that never quite resulted in criminal charges, likely because her victims preferred to avoid publicity. Perhaps most disturbingly, the PI found evidence suggesting Jennifer was already laying groundwork for her next move. She had established online connections with a wealthy widower in Florida, commenting sympathetically on his social media posts about grief and loneliness, while presenting herself as a successful marketing consultant who had recently lost her husband, a complete fabrication. Armed with this evidence, we faced the painful decision of how to tell Thomas. We knew he was deeply under Jennifer's influence and might reject the truth outright. After careful consideration, we decided to approach him alone, without Jennifer present. I called and asked him to meet me at my office on the pretense of discussing a potential commission for his artwork. Surprisingly, he agreed to come without Jennifer. When he arrived, I could see how much he had changed in just 8 months. He had lost weight, had dark circles under his eyes, and seemed anxious about being there without his wife's knowledge. "Jennifer thinks I'm meeting a client," he confided, checking his phone repeatedly. "She likes to join my business meetings usually." This admission only confirmed the control she had established over him. Gently, I began by asking how he and Jennifer had met. As he recounted the story of their chance online encounter, I listened carefully, noting inconsistencies with what the PI had discovered. Then, as compassionately as possible, I showed him the wedding photo of Jennifer with my brother. His initial reaction was confusion, then disbelief. That can't be Jennifer, it looks like her, but..." "Son, we've confirmed it is her," I said quietly. "Her name was Jennifer Whitfield. She was married to your Uncle Robert for 10 years. Thomas shook his head vehemently. "No, that's impossible. Jennifer told me she's never been married before. She told me her last serious relationship was with a professor in graduate school. This has to be a mistake." Carefully, I laid out the evidence: the PI's report, documentation of the sold jewelry, Jennifer's name change, and the timeline of her divorce from Robert and subsequent targeting of Thomas. With each piece of evidence, Thomas became more agitated, alternating between denial and flashes of recognition as certain inconsistencies in Jennifer's stories suddenly made sense. "But why?" he finally asked, his voice breaking. "Why would she do this?" "We believe she's using you to get revenge on Robert and by extension our entire family," I explained. "The divorce was extremely bitter and she lost a significant financial settlement she felt entitled to." Thomas sat in stunned silence, then suddenly stood up. "I need to talk to Jennifer about this. She'll explain everything." I tried to dissuade him from confronting her unprepared, suggesting we bring in the PI or our attorney to help navigate the conversation, but Thomas was adamant. "She's my wife," he insisted. "There has to be an explanation." He left my office in a hurry, ignoring my pleas to wait and develop a plan. 2 days passed with no word from Thomas. Our calls went straight to voicemail, and our texts remained unanswered. Michael drove by their condo but reported their car was gone. Catherine checked with Thomas's publisher, who hadn't heard from him either. Laura and I were sick with worry. On the 3rd day, Jennifer herself called me. "I understand you've been spreading lies about me to my husband," she said, her voice cold and controlled. "I thought we should talk directly." She suggested meeting at a cafe downtown. Against Laura's wishes, I agreed to meet her alone, hoping to better understand her motivations and perhaps find a way to reason with her. The Jennifer who met me at the cafe bore little resemblance to the charming woman who had married my son. Gone was the warm facade, replaced by calculating coldness. She didn't bother with preliminaries. "Yes, I was married to your brother," she stated flatly, And yes, I sought out Thomas deliberately. Does that surprise you? Her candor was startling. Why? I asked. What could you possibly hope to gain by hurting my son? Her eyes flashed with genuine anger. Your brother destroyed my life. I spent 10 years building that business with him, contributed every idea that made it successful, and then he manipulated the courts to leave me with nothing. Nothing. She leaned forward. Do you know what it's like to start over at 40 with nothing to show for a decade of work? To be painted as the villain when you're the victim? I tried to reason with her. Even if what you believe about Robert is true, Thomas had nothing to do with that. He's innocent in all this. She smiled coldly. No one in your family is innocent. You all closed ranks around Robert. None of you reached out to hear my side. And now your precious son, your artistic, sensitive son, is helping me get back what I deserve. By selling family heirlooms. I asked, struggling to maintain my composure. That's just the beginning, she replied. Thomas has signed everything over to me, his business, the condo, his intellectual property, everything. And the best part, he did it willingly out of love. She practically spat the last word. When you cut someone off from everyone who loves them, they become remarkably pliable. Her casual cruelty left me speechless. She continued, seeming to enjoy my distress. Your son is weak, easier to manipulate than I expected, honestly. Within a year, I'll have liquidated everything of value and disappeared. He'll be left with nothing, just like I was. And Robert will know his beloved family suffered because of what he did to me. Thomas will never believe this when I tell him, I said. She laughed. I've already told him everything, Harold. I admitted it all last night. Who I am, why I married him, what I plan to do. And do you know what? He's still with me. I've convinced him that his loving family never really supported his dreams, that you all thought his art was a waste of time, that you always favored his siblings. 15 years of resentments and insecurities I've carefully nurtured for 8 months. He believes you're trying to separate us because you never thought he deserved someone like me. I felt physically ill. You won't get away with this. We have evidence of the fraud, the stolen jewelry, stolen. She interrupted. I have a notarized document where Thomas gifted them to me. Your wife lent them to Thomas, not to you. And as for the business and property transfers, they're all legal. Foolish, perhaps, but legal. As she rose to leave, she delivered a final blow. Thomas and I are moving to Europe next month. He's already told his publisher he'll be working remotely. Don't bother trying to contact him again. He's blocked your numbers and email addresses. Consider this goodbye, Harold. Your family has been torn apart twice now by 2 different women who were underestimated. After she left, I sat there shaking, struggling to process what had happened. The calculated malice, the extent of her manipulation, and the realization that we might truly have lost Thomas. It was almost unbearable. I called Laura immediately, and we gathered the family that evening to share what had happened and discuss our options. Michael was furious, wanting to confront Jennifer directly. Catherine, with her medical training, was concerned about Thomas's psychological state and the potential for Jennifer to escalate her manipulation if she felt cornered. Rebecca, Michael's wife, raised another worrying possibility. If she's planning to leave the country with Thomas, she might be setting up some kind of financial scam where he takes the legal fall while she escapes with the money. Daniel, Catherine's husband, suggested contacting Thomas's close friends who might still have access to him, particularly his college roommate Alex, who had remained a confidant over the years. The days that followed were some of the darkest our family had ever experienced. We consulted attorneys who confirmed the difficult truth. If Thomas had willingly signed over assets and gifted heirlooms, our legal recourse was limited and would require his cooperation, which seemed unlikely given his state of mind. Laura was devastated, particularly about the loss of her family jewelry that had been meant for our daughter and granddaughters. But the material losses paled in comparison to the fear of losing our son completely. We made numerous attempts to reach Thomas through friends, his publisher, even by waiting outside their condo, but he remained completely inaccessible. Alex, Thomas's college friend, tried to contact him but reported that Thomas had responded with a brief text saying he needed space from toxic influences and would reach out when he was ready. We filed a report with the police about the stolen jewelry, but as predicted, Jennifer produced documentation claiming they were gifts, leaving little the authorities could do without Thomas's cooperation. We even tried to contact my estranged brother Robert, thinking his experience with Jennifer might help us strategize, but our messages went unanswered. The rift between us apparently still too wide to bridge even in this crisis. Just when we had nearly given up hope, Catherine received a text from Thomas asking to meet her alone at a coffee shop they used to frequent. She went immediately, finding her brother looking gaunt and exhausted. "I don't have much time," he told her nervously. "Jennifer thinks I'm at a meeting with my editor." What unfolded was both heartbreaking and hopeful. Thomas admitted he had initially believed Jennifer's counter-narrative, that our family had never respected his choices, that we were trying to control him out of disapproval rather than love. She had explanations for everything, he said. Why she had used a different name, why she hadn't mentioned being married before. She said Uncle Robert had abused her, that the family had covered it up, that you were all trying to protect him again by separating us. But something had happened in the 2 weeks since Jennifer's confrontation with me. Thomas had found her journal while she was out, containing detailed notes about her revenge plan, including calculated observations about his vulnerabilities and how best to exploit them. "She wrote about me like I was a mark in a con," he said, his voice breaking. "Noted my daddy issues and artistic temperament as exploitable traits. She had a literal timeline for liquidating my assets." He showed Catherine photos he had taken of several pages, including lists of the family heirlooms with their estimated values and best locations for selling them discreetly. Even more disturbing, the journal contained entries about Jennifer's next potential target, the widower in Florida she had been cultivating online, with notes about his assets and vulnerabilities. This discovery had shattered the elaborate psychological manipulation Jennifer had constructed. Thomas was now secretly working with a different attorney to try to reclaim what could be saved and extract himself from the marriage. "I can't let her know I know," he explained. "She's dangerous when cornered. The attorney says I need to play along while we document everything and secure what assets we can." Catherine brought this information to us immediately. The following weeks were a careful balancing act, pretending we had given up our attempts to contact Thomas while secretly coordinating with him and his attorney to build a case against Jennifer. We learned that while some assets had indeed been transferred to her name, Thomas had managed to protect his most valuable intellectual property through provisions in his publishing contracts that prevented transfer without the publisher's consent. Thomas's editor, Elaine, became an unexpected ally when Thomas cautiously shared what was happening. She worked with the publisher's legal team to reinforce the contract protections and began documenting all interactions with Jennifer, who had been pressuring the company to renegotiate terms that would have given her greater control over Thomas's work. The process was agonizing and complex. Thomas had to maintain the pretense of a devoted husband while secretly documenting Jennifer's activities and securing evidence. There were close calls when she nearly discovered his communications with us or his attorney. The strain showed on him dramatically. He lost more weight and developed anxiety attacks. Jennifer's plot accelerated as she pushed forward plans to move to Europe, pressuring Thomas to liquidate his remaining investments and sell the rights to his backlist of published work. moves his attorney advised him to delay through various excuses while they built their case. Finally, about 6 weeks after our covert communication began, everything was in place. Thomas's attorney had documented sufficient evidence of Jennifer's fraudulent intent, located some of the sold heirlooms that could potentially be recovered, and prepared divorce papers that would protect what remained of Thomas's assets. In a surprising development, my brother Robert finally responded to our messages after Thomas reached out directly. Despite our estrangement, Robert provided valuable documentation from his own divorce proceedings that strengthened Thomas's case, including evidence of Jennifer's pattern of fraud and financial manipulation that had not been fully examined in the earlier case due to the settlement agreement. The confrontation happened at their condo, with both attorneys present and police officers waiting discreetly outside in case Jennifer became violent. Thomas later described her reaction as chilling. She had shifted instantly from the loving wife to cold fury when she realized her plan had unraveled. "You're more like your uncle than I thought," she had told Thomas. "But this isn't over." She was right about that. It wasn't over. The legal proceedings were complex and protracted. Jennifer fought viciously, making wild counterclaims and attempting to paint Thomas as emotionally abusive. She tried to execute financial transactions draining their joint accounts, only to discover Thomas had already secured those funds based on his attorney's advice. When cornered legally, she attempted a different strategy, contacting gossip websites and threatening to sell a story about the dysfunctional Stevens family, hoping we would settle generously to avoid publicity. Her attempts at intimidation failed when our attorney made it clear that such actions would only strengthen our case for defamation and harassment. Some of the financial damage was irreversible. Several family heirlooms were never recovered. Thomas's business suffered significant losses during the months he had been under her influence, with broken professional relationships and damaged reputation in the publishing industry. The investigation also revealed that Jennifer had taken out substantial loans in Thomas's name, creating debts he would be fighting for years. But the greatest damage was psychological. Thomas entered therapy to process the trauma of such calculated betrayal. He struggled with profound trust issues and blamed himself for not seeing through Jennifer's deception. "I brought her into our family," he said during a particularly difficult family therapy session. "I let her manipulate me into hurting all of you. How do I ever make that right?" Our family rallied around him. Michael offered Thomas a position designing marketing materials for the architectural firm, while he rebuilt his independent career. Catherine helped find him an excellent therapist who specialized in psychological manipulation and recovery. Laura and I welcomed him back into our home temporarily, giving him space to heal while ensuring he wasn't alone with his thoughts too often. Rebecca arranged for a financial advisor specializing in recovery from financial abuse to work with Thomas on rebuilding his credit and financial security. Daniel used his medical connections to find Thomas a support group for survivors of manipulative relationships. Even Thomas's nieces and nephews helped in their own ways, Emma sharing her art with him again, Zachary inviting him to basketball games, and the younger children simply offering the uncomplicated love and acceptance children naturally provide. As for Jennifer, the divorce was finalized after 8 months of legal battles. She received far less than she had hoped, though the process exhausted much of Thomas's remaining resources. Criminal charges were considered for the theft of family heirlooms, but ultimately not pursued as part of the settlement agreement, where Jennifer revealed the location of several pieces that had not yet been sold. We later learned she had attempted to contact my brother Robert, sending him taunting messages about how she had hurt his family, only to discover that Robert had moved to Australia years earlier and had little ongoing connection to us. Her revenge had largely missed its intended target. The most surprising outcome of this ordeal was the tentative reconciliation between Robert and me. After providing evidence for Thomas's case, Robert reached out directly, suggesting a video call. That first conversation was awkward and tense, 15 years of hurt and resentment creating a nearly impenetrable barrier. But there was also a shared concern for Thomas and a mutual enemy in Jennifer that provided common ground. Over the following months, we had several more conversations, each a little easier than the last. Robert admitted that his ambition and pride had driven many of his poor decisions during our business partnership. I acknowledged that my rigidity and failure to compromise had contributed to our falling out. Neither of us was blameless in the estrangement, and recognizing that was the first step toward healing. The last we heard, Jennifer had moved to Florida and was already involved with a wealthy real estate developer, likely her next mark. We considered warning him, but ultimately decided against direct intervention that might trigger legal retaliation from Jennifer. Instead, Thomas's attorney discreetly provided information to the man's family about Jennifer's history, allowing them to make their own decisions about how to proceed. It's been 2 years since this nightmare began. Thomas is slowly rebuilding his life and career. He recently published a graphic novel based loosely on his experience, a psychological thriller about identity and deception that has received critical acclaim and helped him reclaim his artistic voice. His financial situation remains challenging, but he approaches it with determination and a new appreciation for financial literacy. He's cautiously beginning to date again, though he proceeds with understandable wariness, working closely with his therapist to recognize healthy relationship dynamics and potential warning signs. Our family bonds, tested by this ordeal, have emerged stronger. The experience even led to an unexpected reconciliation. After learning what had happened, my brother Robert and I have continued our tentative rebuilding of our relationship. Last Christmas, Robert and his new wife visited from Australia, the first time he had joined a family gathering in over 15 years. The reunion was emotional and healing, though we all recognize that fully rebuilding trust will take more time. Robert provided valuable information for Thomas's legal case and expressed deep remorse about the indirect role his past played in Thomas's suffering. Michael and Robert, meeting as adults for the first time in many years, discovered shared interests and perspectives that have led to a meaningful uncle-nephew relationship. The experience has left us all more aware of how vulnerability can be weaponized by those with malicious intent. We've become more protective of each other, without becoming closed off to authentic new relationships. We've learned that reconciliation is possible even after years of estrangement, and that family loyalty means standing by each other through the darkest times rather than simply closing ranks. Most importantly, we've learned that recovery from betrayal is not a straight line. Thomas still has days when the weight of his experience feels crushing. Laura still mourns the family treasures that connected generations. I still question how I failed to recognize Jennifer sooner. But we are healing together, one day at a time. If you like this story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.